Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming. It's lovely to see you. I'm glad you're here. I heard a story about a man lying on the sofa in his pyjamas and dressing gown. And his wife called out, "Hurry up, we're going to be late for church." And the man said, "I'm not going. The church is cold and unfriendly. The people don't like it. And to be honest, I just don't feel it." His wife folded her arms and said, "Look, the church is warm and friendly. The people do like you. And anyway, you're preaching, so you better get up and go." Now, I can assume that nobody had to drag me off the sofa to come here today. But I do understand that feeling. That moment when courage feels small, when motivation feels thin, when the future feels a little bit heavier than usual. And yet, here's the thing. God often begins his greatest work in us at that very moment when we feel least ready for it. Today, through Isaiah, through Paul, through Jesus, God is calling us to courage. Not loud, dramatic courage, but the quiet, steady courage to become who God said we are. Now, Isaiah begins with a simple instruction. Look to the rock from which you were cut. Isaiah is reminding God's people of their origin story, their strength, their heritage, the foundation of the faith they stand on. He's saying, you come from courage. You come from faithfulness. You come from people who trusted God long before. You come from a story that began centuries ago. Think of Abraham and Sarah stepping out into the unknown. No map, no guarantee, just a promise. Moses standing before the Red Sea, a moment where everything looked impossible, and yet God made a way. Think of Ruth, choosing loyalty over comfort. A young woman stepping into a future she couldn't see, trusting that God would meet her. Think of David facing Goliath, not with armour, not with strength, but with courage and trust. Think of Mary saying, "Blessed be me according to your word." A teenage girl carrying the hope of the world. Think of Peter stepping out of that boat, not because the water looked safe, but because Jesus was calling. Think of Paul writing letters from prison, turning confinement into encouragement. Think of the saints, the martyrs, the faithful, ordinary people whose names we will never know. People who prayed, people who served, people who loved, people who kept the flame of faith alive. You stand in that long line of believers stretching back thousands of years. People who trusted God. People who stepped out in faith. People who discovered that God was faithful. And here's the inspiring part. That line doesn't stop behind you. It continues through you. You know, when we come up for communion, and I watch that line of people from different countries, different cultures, different backgrounds, speaking different languages, all walking forward together, I see Isaiah's words coming alive. All different rocks, all different shapes, all different stories, all loved and cherished by God, all cut from the same rock. This is the first courage. Courage to remember who you already are. And Paul begins Romans 2 with a bold invitation. Present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. This is your spiritual worship. And think about that. A living sacrifice. Not a one-time offering. Not something you give and walk away from. A life offered. A life opened. A life placed in God's hands. Imagine standing before God with open hands. Not clenched fists. Not hands full of your own little plans and desires. But open hands saying, Lord, take what I have and make it yours. That is a living sacrifice. And Paul says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And transformation is rather dramatic, it's usually slow, it's usually quiet, and it's usually steady. Imagine clay on a potter's wheel. Soft, responsive, willing to be shaped. The potter doesn't rush, he doesn't force, he guides, presses, smooths, reshapes. Transformation is the gentle pressure of God's hands over time. And then Paul begins to list gifts. Before Paul listed it, I want to tell you something someone once said to me, which was, I'm absolutely certain that God is calling me. But I'm equally certain he's calling someone else much better organised than I am. And that's how many people feel. Many people don't believe they have any gifts at all. But Paul says otherwise. Some are gifted to teach, some to encourage, some to give, some to lead, some to show mercy, some with practical skills, some with creative skills, some with prayer, some with friendship, some with courage, some with listening, some with compassion, some with faith, some with vision, some with patience, some with joy, some with wisdom, some with service, some with hope. Imagine a mosaic. Tiny pieces, each one different, each one shaped strangely, each one seemingly significant on its own. But when the artist places them together, they become something beautiful. The church is God's mosaic. Your gift is one of those pieces. Psalm 138 gives us a promise. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your gifts are not accidents. Your passions are not random. Sorry? Oh, I'm coming apart. Thank you. Wasn't planned. Your talents are not coincidences. God placed them in you for the building of his church and the blessing of the world. This is the second courage. Courage to believe you have something to offer and to offer it. There's a moment in every church's life when people stop asking, what's the church doing? And start asking, what can I bring? And when that moment comes, everything changes. Because the church is not built on committees, or rotas, or structures. The church is built on gifts. Your gifts. Imagine what would happen if every single person here offered just one gift this week. One act of kindness. One moment of courage. One prayer to someone who's struggling. One invitation to someone who feels alone. One encouraging message to someone who needs it. One visit to someone who hasn't been out in a while. One phone call to someone who's grieving. One offer of help to a neighbour. One gesture of forgiveness. One act of generosity. One step into a ministry you quietly wondered about. One yes to God. Imagine planting a handful of seeds. Small, ordinary, unimpressive. But give them time and they become shade, fruit, beauty, life. One gift is one seed, and seeds grow. Imagine the encouragement. Imagine the healing. Imagine the welcome. Imagine the hope. Imagine the joy. Imagine the change in you as you offer that one gift. The church becomes alive when people become alive. And you, yes, you, have something that God has placed in you, that this church needs, that this community needs, that the world needs. Psalm 138 promises that God will fulfill his purpose for you. But God often fulfills his purpose for others through your gifts. So ask, not with pressure, but with excitement. Lord, what can I bring? And then bring it, even if it's small, even if it's simple, even if it's quiet. Because God can set a whole church on fire with one spark of courage from one willing heart. Jesus uses a particular word for the church, a word that carried a very specific meaning in his day. He says, on this rock I will build my church. But the word he uses is ecclesia. And in the ancient world, an ecclesia wasn't defined by a physical structure. It wasn't about walls and roofs or buildings. It was about people. People called out of ordinary life, called out of isolation, called out together for a shared purpose. Jesus is saying, I am calling you out. I am calling you together. I'm building something with you. And then he gives this called out people a foundation. He looks at Simon, impulsive, hot-headed, foot-in-mouth Simon, and says, you are Peter. You are the rock. But Jesus doesn't stop there. He knows Peter is not the perfect stone. He knows Peter is uneven, unpredictable, rough around the edges. He knows Peter will wobble, stumble, deny, and doubt. So Jesus adds something essential. He becomes the cornerstone. An ancient building where the cornerstone was the first stone laid. Everything else took its alignment from that one stone. If the cornerstone was straight, the building was straight. If the cornerstone was solid, the building was solid. If the cornerstone was true, the building was true. Every other stone, different shapes, different sizes, different angles, found its place because the cornerstone held the line. And that's what Jesus does for us. We're all different shapes. Some of us feel polished. Some of us feel chipped. Some of us feel weathered by life. Some of us feel like we don't quite fit. But Jesus says, bring me your shape. Bring me your story. Bring me your edges. I will hold you steady. You don't have to match those stones around you. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be symmetrical. You don't have to be impressive. You just have to be aligned with the cornerstone. And when you align your life with Christ, you become part of something strong, something purposeful, something God is building. His ecclesia, his called out people, his living church. This is the third courage. Courage to align your life with Christ, the cornerstone. In Matthew, Jesus asks, "Who do you say I am?" Peter answers, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus responds, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." But Peter wasn't ready. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't stable. He wasn't consistent. But Jesus looked at him and saw more than Peter saw in himself. Jesus spoke Peter's future, not his failures. Jesus spoke Peter's calling, not his confusion. Jesus spoke Peter's identity, not his insecurity. And here's the inspiring truth. Jesus does the same with you. This is the fourth courage. Courage to let Jesus tell you who you are becoming. Though Isaiah says, remember your roots. Paul says, offer yourself to God and be renewed. Psalm 1-8 says, God will fulfill his purpose for you. Jesus says, let me speak your future. Identity remembered. Identity renewed. Identity aligned. And identity revealed. Courage grows when we stand in all four. So today, as people cut from the rock, as people shaped by the potter, as pieces in God's mosaic, as seeds ready to be planted, as stones aligned with the cornerstone, hear this. You are not there by accident. You are not gifted by accident. You are not called by accident. God has placed something in you that this church needs, that this community needs, that someone in your life needs. So step forward, step willing, step hopeful, step courageous. Let this week be the one week you offer one gift. Let this be the week you plant one seed. Let this be the week you say one yes to God. Let this be the week you discover that courage grows the moment you choose to use it. Because God is building something here. And he's building it through you. Lord, give us courage. Not loud, dramatic courage, but the quiet, steady courage to become who you say we are. Fulfill your purpose and help us to walk in the gifts you have given. Amen. Amen.